disasters related to national disaster relief. Unconventional maritime thing. Okay, thank you. So I mean the three speakers already presented their views, and now we come to the Q&A. And please, I mean, not only mention your name and also countries, but also please make a very short sentence. Yeah, I mean, without any what you call, because usually in particular ASEAN countries, yeah, in particular again Indonesian, usually I mean before they ask their questions, they raise their questions. I mean they initiate it with the history or something like that. Yeah. So please, I mean, raise your hand. Yes, please. Yes, please. You're the first person. Yes, yes, please.
Thank you so much indeed for this time. As I mentioned from the beginning, the presentation really strengthened our idea and amplify our perspective. I really a bit concerned about the initiatives of MDA. When we are talking about solidity for ASEAN, of course, sometimes we think that the unity is very important for the common perspective. However, when we come to the national interests, whether vital interests, important interests, marginal interests, or even survival interests. So, of course, that's unintentionally and intentionally, or perhaps directly or indirectly, will be different. That's something that we couldn't avoid for their purpose. So dealing with the initiatives of MDA that you mentioned before, there are many advantages and disadvantages, of course. So how can you measure that the initiative should be implemented, should be accepted if blah, 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 blah in that country? Or the initiative of MDA should be ignored because of the country has the condition blah, 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 blah. So from that measurement, we can count how many countries in the ASEAN that have the common perception. Of course, in this case, we couldn't say that ASEAN will have only one perception, single perception. I don't think so. So that's why I really need, and please explore in detail what is actually the measurement in that case. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Thought that we'll be gathering 3 questions like session 1. Have a little more time to buy. Thank you for the great questions. I do agree that there should be a criteria to assess each of the MDA initiative, and the criteria could be different among ASEAN members, right? And then the criteria could also for the offering countries and also for the offered countries. That is something that I do agree. And actually in the presentations, I did mention some of the criteria that I think the offering countries and the offered countries should have, such as the offering should be aiming at inclusive participations, such as it could, the second one is transparent in terms of communications about the technicality, functional of it, and transparent about the usage of it. So, and then the third, it has to be compatible, right? And coordinated, because right now they are still a little bit separated. There are so many efforts going on at once with overlapping content. So sometimes we don't know which one to choose. So these criteria could be the beginning. And from that, dialogues and exchanges and communications and research are always and trial and errors are always the way forward to to come up with a more concrete set of criteria.
So, Brigadier General, don't want to. Do you have any?
Our discussion this morning, you are most welcome. The floor is yours, but before that, I would like to remind you to identify you and the organization you represent before taking up the floor. And the floor is now open for participants. I don't expect that the governor will also pose questions. Thank you. Anyone from this side? Oh, please.
Thank you so much indeed for this opportunity. And thanks a lot for the presentation. Those presentations really enrich and also strengthen, even amplify our perspective and ideas. I am Major General Budi Pramono from Lemhannas. Allow me to raise two questions. The first one, given to the polarity of ASEAN, if I may divide it into 4 big parts, those countries who take part to the America, those countries who take side to the China, those countries who steady like the rock as non-block, and those countries really firm in the corridor of confusion, in the corridor of bewilderment. Excellency, Mr. Khotan said that how ASEAN survive. In this case, I really want to know in number, how many percent those countries who take side in US, take side to China as non-block, and even in the corridor of confusion. This is very important to us, how to calculate how strong, how solid ASEAN in the future in terms of facing the next and dynamic threat in the future. That's the first one. The second one, also given from the 7 ASEAN outlook. Of course, the first one, we should uphold our international law. This is very important. Why? Because we are living in the international kitchen. We are living in the borderless countries in this planet. Of course, we should uphold our international, especially the principle of the international. And then the cooperation. We couldn't avoid the cooperation. Every conflict happen, we should solve by cooperation or even collaboration. We don't have other system or strategy except the cooperation. After the cooperation, of course, in this case, no matter how high the escalation in this regional, but we should avoid it. That's very important. And other thing that needed is, please consult to the other country. Perhaps the other country...
You may proceed with your question, General.
Yes, that's 7 ASEAN outlook. My question is, do you know actually who is or what is or how those superpowers reply, answer, and then take action for our 7 ASEAN outlook? This is very important because we should know exactly to whom we deal to. If we do not know that how ASEAN deal to whom, so for what? How we can calculate in this matter? This is very important. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you. I would presume that your question is directed to the three speakers, but they are free to respond to your question.
Please, for those speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, General Budi. On the first question, so I think, in principle, every country, including especially members of ASEAN, really want, to stay non-aligned. They don't like to be pulled, into one camp or the other. So that's for sure. But my worry is that, when the pressure comes, then, countries would calculate, right, according to their, strategic interest. Then, probably, when there would be the temptation to choose. So at the moment, it's very hard to say that country A and B already in the Chinese pocket, country C and D already in the American pocket, and country E and F confused, or, country F and G is actually non-aligned. So that's actually, I think, the state of play at the moment. So each member of ASEAN still value the so-called strategic autonomy of ASEAN as a whole. So that's why I'm torn with regard to the utility of ASEAN. On the one hand, it cannot solve and manage and respond to this kind of problem. On the other hand, this collectivity within ASEAN actually provide, the possibility for member states to actually deal with the pressure from the outside. So we're still struggling within that context. So when you see, for example, well, only 2 countries in ASEAN, treaty allies of the US, Philippines and Thailand. Even for Philippines and Thailand, I'm quite sure there are Philippines delegate and Thai speakers here, would of course value the autonomy. They don't want to be basically told what to do, and then they would define their own interest by themselves. That, I think, probably preferable for even allies of the great powers. On the second one, I'm not sure I understand the 7 outlook. But the only outlook that I understand is basically the Indo-Pacific outlook. Well, all the major powers, all the great powers, already pay support or say support, or probably you can say lip service. But nevertheless, they basically all support the Indo-Pacific outlook, that ASEAN come out with, because they do understand the so-called quote-unquote neutrality of ASEAN works in the best of interest of every great powers. So I don't think, even China and the US, will benefit if ASEAN, get divided. So at the end, united ASEAN serve, the strategic interests of great powers. So because they do need, this region not to be dominated by any hegemonic power. So that's basically my take on where we are at the moment.